We're going to do two presentations, one from Mr. Holtz. He's going to talk about a number of the different data pieces that we look at the high school. So he's going to look at things like the SAT, college acceptance report, and advanced placement information. And then later on, Mr. Vigliotti is going to work with Ms. Parsons, and we're going to talk about social emotional learning.
A big focus that the state is looking at is that proficiency. So we had 62% of our students at the benchmark or above in reading, and we had 42% in math. When you compare the state, so both Terryville High School and the state went up a little bit last year. We did close the gap on the state. I want to say for our reading, we went up about 5%. The state only went up 1%. And our math, I think we went up nearly 10, and I think the state only went up 3 or 4. So while we're either at the level of the state or a little behind, we have started to close that gap over this past year. Our mean averages, which I had on the former slide, are actually the highest average we've seen in the 5-year span. I think that says quite a bit when you consider the fact that now instead of 60, 70 students taking it, you have 100, 110. Over the last year, though, just comparing the last 2 junior classes that we had, you can see that we have gone up substantially in reading, nearly 10 points on the average, and right around 4.5% going up in terms of the proficiency mark. And then for math, there's definitely a large gap that we've started to put on, increasing nearly 20 points on the average and about 9% there on the proficiency. So we're quite pleased with the last junior class that came through. They really took to some of the instructional and tutoring stuff that we put into place, and I think their efforts show right there. But what I will tell you is that the benchmark from a junior taking the PSAT in October to a junior taking the SAT in the spring is 20-point change. So if you were to consider that, our students that did the reading test at 473, if they had gone up the 20 points that the College Board is kind of deeming as a normal growth, we'd be looking at 493 for an average. So we have surpassed the expected growth over that period of time in reading. Likewise, if you were to look at the math, that 459 that they had scored in terms of an average score in October, if you were to add the 20-point shift of the benchmark, that would be 479. Our students far surpassed that and grew a substantial amount over that short period of time from October to April.
Good evening, everybody. So we're here to talk a little bit about social emotional learning, which, as Dr. Semmel just mentioned, is one of our primary goals for the district this year, which he presented, last month at the meeting. So we're just going to go through a little bit of kind of why and where we're headed with this, what we've been doing and where we're going. So really what we're looking at here with social emotional learning is how do we really build the strongest school communities we can in our district, in our individual buildings, and then collectively in the town? And how do we really give students those skills they need to leave after graduation and go out into the world and do all the great things that we know they're going to be able to do? Just to speak to some of the things going on here at the high school, one of the initiatives that we've kind of started this year that we're pretty proud of and I think is going pretty well so far is something called Troops, which really what it is it's a small group of students that are hooked up with a teacher, and it's kind of mixed grades. And the idea is to take time every other week. It's during the flex time, so it's on Tuesdays. And really what we're doing is we're allowing the students and that teacher to develop, the relationships and kind of decide, what do we want to use this time for? What do we want to do? We're not necessarily focused on academics. So we've had people doing all kinds of things. We have, up here, for example, some students in one troop were doing some tie-dye. There was some students decorating, that was yesterday, decorating, pumpkin cookies. And I was outside throwing the football with a couple of kids yesterday, and it was a beautiful morning. There's a lot of these kinds of things. And really the idea here is to build relationships and increase connectedness. In addition, on the structural side of things, we're looking at things like a grading pilot, which you might not immediately connect the idea of grading to social emotional learning, but really when we start thinking about what are the structural opportunities we have to embed some of these things, and we start looking at something like how do we grade and how do we assess students, and do grades and the way students currently think about work, does that help them develop skills like self-management? Does it help them look at what am I able to do right now and how do I go back and maybe revise or figure out where I'm strong or where I need to grow moving forward? And so looking at our assessment practices is one way we can focus on some of those things intentionally to help with skills like self-management.
At the middle school, you see a picture on the right of their families, and families again cross the grade bands so that 6th graders are starting to meet 8th graders, and they're working with teachers that they might not otherwise have in the school. They're continuing their work with restorative practices, which is really having kids be conscious about if there was a misbehavior of some sort, why did that happen, and how can I restore the people that I may have offended or hurt by that behavior. And they're also, as a staff, going through the school connectedness activities. The state has provided us some activities on school climate, and they're working through those with their staff. At Fisher, they have what is called paw pennies as part of their PBIS, and students earn paw pennies, and then they trade them in for special activities at the end. I've heard there's drumming, there's dancing, there's all kinds of, I think there's some STEM activities and science experiments. And also parents who may be at Fisher, you'll see that Principal Rohansky at the end of her newsletters really links to videos for parents to see to work on some of these social emotional skills, and we're also compiling them on the school website, the district website, which you see down on the bottom left. Additionally, at Plymouth, Plymouth works with what's called bucket filling, and how you fill each other's buckets and you don't dip, you don't take out of somebody's bucket. And at the beginning of the year, we talked about how relationships are sort of like bank accounts. Every interaction you have with somebody either adds to that bank account and makes it more positive, or detracts from it and puts us in the red. So another thing they're working on is reading as a book club, this book called Reaching and Teaching Children Exposed to Trauma. And I know when we hear the word trauma, we think something horrible, but really thinking about kids and their experiences and walking in their shoes. So what are the things that children experience that may impact, they carry the baggage with them to school. An example is parents who may be suffering from depression. That's something that for kids, it's unpredictable at home. They may be children who otherwise appear like nothing else is going on, but they come with a little bit of baggage, and we just need to work with our approach.
The next Board of Education meeting is November 15th. Typically, it would have been November 8th, which is the second Wednesday, but because of the election being on November 7th, the board meeting would have occurred the very next day. So we had decided to move the meeting to November 15th. So just to make sure that's clear to folks. And with that, my last thought, and I'm sure there'll be some other thoughts about this, but we do have 3 members who I just want to thank who will, this is their last meeting, so Mr. Orsini and Mr. Goodwin and Mr. Melchiona, I know that this is your last meeting, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again. People don't always realize how many hours you put into this particular position. If they only think that this is the only meeting you have or this is the only time you put into it, they're sadly mistaken about how many hours you folks put in. So I appreciate all the time you've put in, the open-mindedness that you bring to the Board of Education, and just the dedication that you've shown to the students and families of Plymouth over the years. So you guys will be sorely missed, and I wish you guys nothing but the best of luck in the future.